Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Devine. I am joined here by my colleague Angelo Calianno. We are members of ITSS Verona, part of the Greater Middle East international team. Today, we are joined by BJ Sadiq, who is a British Pakistani writer, journalist, and English poet. He's the author of a best-selling biography of Pakistan's former Prime Minister, Imran Khan, titled Let There Be Justice, The Political Journey of Imran Khan, and has also written a novella in verse called Of Kings and Nobilities. He joins us today to talk about the ongoing situation in Pakistan and where the country is heading. BJ, thanks for joining us. Could you give us a quick overview of the history of Pakistani democracy so international listeners who are unaware can learn of the context of what's happening and as the events unfold in the country today?
Thank you, John. Thank you, Angelo. Thank you, both of you, for having me here and giving me the opportunity to speak. This is a very important question, yet a very difficult one to answer. In my opinion, all democracies in the world are not just a representation of the popular will. They are a representation of your culture, your habits, your religious systems, and your liberal beliefs. So one democratic model that works, for instance, in France might not work in Pakistan. But to tell you in simple terms, according to the constitution, Pakistan is a parliamentary democracy. And we, like all such democracies, are supposed to have an independent judiciary, an independent media, minority rights, adult suffrage, freedom for women, universal education. But in spirit, Pakistan is ruled by its powerful military. And that has been the case, unfortunately, since its inception. It is the military that takes all the important decisions, and they tend to rule in partnership with the civil bureaucratic complex, which composes of politicians and bureaucrats, basically who play the second fiddle, who act as managers or the king's cabinet. If I'd rather use a fancy term, but it is really the military that calls the shot. And over the years, the culture, the military has sort of birched over us is one of corruption and extortion. The corruption of the elite classes has wrought the system like ulcer. And when I say the elite classes, it includes the military, the politicians, the bureaucrats, the industrialists. Now, since the 1950s, the military has hogged the lion's share of the national budget. And they do this using India's threat as an excuse. And now the military, in addition to enjoying a substantial political clout, enjoys an extraordinary financial clout as well. So it has transformed itself into a huge business empire, a sort of a business conglomerate that runs into billions of dollars, commanding shares in every sphere of the economy: textiles, cereal, power plants, agriculture, transport, security services, banking, and now even the media. So now the question is that, if I return to the flaw of a constitutional democracy like Pakistan, and just to give you a bit of history, the flaw of a constitutional democracy like this is that it is largely a feudal economy, a feudal country. Majority of the state's population is concentrated in the rural areas. It's basically an agrarian economy with very little industry. There is some hope on the industrial. There is some industrial growth in certain urban centers, but largely an agrarian economy. Now, in a constituency-based setup, a politician, whenever he gets elected, makes two sets of promises. One is made to the general public, the usual trope: good education, good health, clean water, more jobs, sanitation, better crop management, etc., etc. But the more specific promise, and one that I feel is very diabolic in nature, is made to individual politicians or landlords who backed this man and helped him in winning the election. So now, once he is in power, he feels obliged to reward these people with corrupt contracts, tax breaks, state loans, which are never paid back. So what happens is that you marginalize a very large section of the population, of the petty bourgeois, and the state remains weak. The political system remains weak, and the military continues to lord over the state, at times exercising unbridled influence. But recently, from all this residue, we have seen a wave of populism spearheaded by Imran Khan and his political party, which I think in a country like Pakistan is useful, because populism educates. It has its downside, but in a state like this, it educates. It is particularly important for people who felt marginalized in society, stifled by the militaries, stifled by the politicians. So suddenly, these people, they start speaking of their rights, their need to have stable lives. So I think in those areas, what Imran Khan has done over the past decade is a phenomenal contribution. It has not entirely paid off, but popular perception has altered without a doubt, which alone is a good thing, and I think it's a step in the right direction. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yes, it does.
BJ, thanks a lot. Yeah, that was very, very interesting, actually, very clear. Talking about Imran Khan, we're very curious because you actually wrote a very interesting biography, and but your book is actually nowhere to be found in Pakistan. We would like to, if you can answer, to ask why. And also, again, talking about Imran Khan, he just had the sentences for more years. I would like you to comment this. I mean, his sentence. What do you think? Also, based on your research on your book, what do you think of the figure on Imran Khan? And do you think that actually those accusations are actually legitimate? So, can you tell anything about?
Yes. First, about the book. I'm afraid I'm not in a position to say that there has been an official ban, but these things are done very furtively. If you go to the market, you won't find the book. If you order it online, chances are that it won't ever get delivered to your house. Although the websites of all major book retailers suggest that it is in stock. Uh, so I suspect there is some kind of a silent ban on any Imran Khan related literature, which is not just vexatious for an author, but it is also amusing for me, because firstly, the book is not by any stretch of imagination a hagiography. I mean, it is not supported by Khan, so it's not a partisan work. So it was not written to please Khan or to appease his supporters. It is an academic effort, in a literary output. It aims to educate and introduce to the world an iconic personalities with all his flaws, his foibles, his merits. So that's my comment on the book. On the next question about his sentence and what kind of a figure, I think, what kind of a prime minister or a man Imran is, and on his recent past, the accusations and the sentence and his incarceration. Uh, there are divergent views on the question of his efficiency as a prime minister or as a political leader. A lot of people have written about it, and might actually rubbish his performance, which is a very myopic way of judging a certain regime. I think he was in power for roughly 3.5 years, and around 1.5 year was entirely devoted to COVID-19. So and businesses were closed, so it was very a tough situation, not just for a weak economy like Pakistan, but rest of the world. So he really had 2 years to really show some kind of resolve. He had made some progress on climate change, which is rather a groundbreaking sector for Pakistan, considering we have so many other challenges. He made some progress in the health sector by giving out health cards to the poor. Mind you, Imran is a reverential social activist. He has, to his credit, 3 cancer hospitals in 3 different cities of the state. And I believe 2 of these hospitals were established before he came to power. He was particularly insistent on tax reforms, a very important area, because Pakistan's tax to GDP ratio has been consistently low over the last several decades. A lot of the main sectors of the local economy don't pay their taxes. The real estate, which is a huge sector, is undertaxed, hardly taxed, I think. The stock markets are not taxed. Many of the large scale industries get tax breaks, which does not make sense. So Imran was insistent that there should be a rise in government revenue, and his government's economic performance, by the way, was fairly laudable at a time when he was removed from office. So some of the indicators were showing growth. And then I also believe Imran is a roaring nationalist, and it is widely believed that his loyalty towards the land runs deep and cannot be questioned. The origins of his popularity, are of course rooted in a long and glorious sports career. He was a brilliant cricketer. His contemporaries, of course, in look upon such insinuations as with utter contempt. In my opinion, his biggest mistake is his failure in suppressing the radical far right. That was his, and I think in the handling of this subject, he was rather facetious, because religious fundamentalism mars the image of the country, and it keeps the foreign investors at bay. His second flaw was a cabinet flushed with politicians as corrupt as his contemporaries. So I think he either did not get the time, he was too hasty in getting into power, and then handpicking his favorite people. But he relied mostly on politicians who had tarnished backgrounds to come into power. His third flaw was that he was very stubborn, very incorrigible, very undiplomatic. Now these are characteristics that you don't usually associate, that you don't associate with a
Prime
politician.
Minister. Yes.
In fact, I'm not sure if this should be a flaw or a trait.
And what about this sentence? I mean, do you think those accusations are actually true, or they were made up by the military intelligence? So what do you think?
I think these sentences are politically motivated. He was ousted from power in April 2022, and following a no controversial, no confidence vote. And since then, he has been fighting off a storm of court cases. Some of them as grave as sedition and inciting hatred against the military establishment. Right now, he is in jail for those charges since August of last year. He has also been charged for concealing the money he supposedly earned by selling state gifts he received during his 3.5-year rule. These gifts include Rolex watches, a ring, and a pair of, I think, gaudy cufflinks.
Yeah.
With a combined worth of approximately £500,000.
Yeah.
Now, I think all of these charges are baseless and politically motivated. He has been fighting over 150 cases, or I think close to 200 cases, all piled up during the course of a year. So how is it possible that one man is such a big
guilty
criminal?
over such a many accusations? Yeah.
Yes, and he had clearly fallen out with the military establishment. Popular political leaders falling out with military leadership has a controversial history in Pakistan. So this is not something that's surprising. And there are also reports that he had offended Biden's administration in the US. Imran initially blamed the US for interfering in Pakistan's internal matters and having him removed from office. This accusation puts the military in a very awkward spot, because it is hardly a revelation that Washington has had a it is not a revelation. Washington has had a long-standing relationship with Pakistan's military elite, in whom they've often confided and invariably rewarded for dismantling democracy. So one must not self-assuredly deny Khan's position on the matter. I think a cursory perusal of Pakistan's political history reveals the manner in which political leaders in the past have often been reprimanded, jailed, and even executed, and sometimes at the behest of Washington. In fact, I'm not sure if you've heard of, if you're familiar with Tariq Ali, who's a
Yes.
famous British left-wing intellectual. He uses the word janissary for the military. Now, janissary, janissaries were mercenaries of the Ottoman rulers, put in place to capture remote territories.
Yeah.
So he calls the military janissaries of the
Janissary,
of the American Empire, which is
Wow.
very interesting, and it cannot be
Very
blindly
interesting,
disputed.
Yeah.
So I think the charges are politically motivated. Yes.
Thanks, BJ. That's a fascinating answer. BJ, again, from Europe, it is very hard for us to understand the Pakistani elections. I mean, also the system in Pakistan, I know this is very complicated, but from our point of view, it seems that the party that were supported by Khan parties actually won, but then they didn't have enough places actually to rule the countries. So the prime minister today is again the one from the Muslim Brotherhood. So can you tell us exactly what happens? Can you clarify a little bit of the election, of the situation?
Yes. In the recent elections we had, which were held on February the 8th, last month, the military establishment tried every trick in its store and deployed the full might of its authority to keep Imran's party out of the electoral contest. His party was banned from using the iconic cricket bats, the logo, now on the ballot papers. Now, in a country where over a quarter of the electorate lacks basic education, these symbols work like the guiding North Star on polling day. So this meant that PTI, which is Imran's party, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, the Movement for Justice Party, that's how it's translated in English. This meant that PTI party members had to contest elections as independent candidates. So using obscure symbols, which was likely to confuse the voters and put Imran's party at a severe disadvantage. Now, it is noteworthy that no other political party was stripped of its constitutional right of going to polls without a symbol. And surprisingly, Imran's party, against all odds, managed to clinch close to 100 seats in a parliament composing of 266 seats, which is quite...
I guess we're 99, no, if I'm not wrong there.
Yes, I think it was 95 initially, then it was reduced to 93. Initially, the first figure was around 100 or 102. Then after a few hours, it went down to 95. And so we knew something was wrong. But even this 102 was not right. So, but considering that the elections were rigged, it is still quite appreciable, considering that there was an intense crackdown against his party. Many of his party members were arrested just before the polls. And the elections were hugely rigged in favor of Imran's competitors, who comprising chiefly of one name that you've mentioned, the Sharif brothers, the PMLN party, and Benazir Bhutto, the other party, the PPP, the Pakistan People's Party, led by Bilawal Bhutto, son of deceased former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. And the good thing about these elections were that nearly 60 million people turned out to vote, which is quite an astronomical figure. I think if they had not rigged the elections, Imran's candidates might have easily secured around 170 odd seats. And a political party to form the government on its own requires around 134 seats. So now the tragedy of a Pakistani election is that the military never allows one party to sweep the polls, which results in a hung parliament or a split mandate, meaning that the military remains in a powerful position and continues to, control the system. They feel that by doing these things, they can have a better control of the system. I think in the age of social media, this is a bit far fetched. Because I'm not sure how long they can go on fooling the public. Like, people have even posted videos of unknown men breaking into polling stations and playing with the ballot papers and trying to alter the results. So that is also a reality. The situation on the ground is, by the way, is that Imran's competitor is now in power. Nawaz Sharif's party had a backdoor deal with the military. That's very obvious. And amusingly, Sharif was removed from power in 2017. In 2018, a year later, after a lingering inquiry, which was carried on by the National Accountability Court, sentenced him to 10 years in prison. In addition, the ruling carried a penalty of $10.6 million. He was also banned from holding any political office. Now, that same year, Sharif had flown to London on bail for a medical treatment, but absconded, and he enjoyed, and then he never returned, and he enjoyed a period of uninterrupted exile. He was often spotted on Oxford, mooning about on Oxford Street. Last year, suddenly, he was flown back into Pakistan in October. He was absolved of all his past sins and transgressions, and his party has now formed the government in spite of the drubbing it suffered from Imran's men. And now Sharif's younger brother Shahbaz Sharif is now the prime minister. But on election day, there was a nationwide suspension of mobile networks, and there were internet blackouts, which many believe was done to tamper the results at the polling stations.
Thank you very much, BJ.
BJ, Pakistan is facing many different issues, both domestically and internationally. We mentioned briefly Imran Khan pushing forward climate change policies, but as you mentioned, corruption, internal affairs, internal security, coupled with the rising tension between China and the US, a potential, an almost guaranteed third premiership for Modi in India, a hostile Afghanistan. What solutions, what mandates does the current government in Pakistan actually have to solve these, and are there any solutions?
John, the concern is, as you said, there are a host of concerns. Right now, the real concern is the economy, which is in dire straits. Pakistan is going to the IMF for another bailout. Around 1,600 clothing factories have shut down. Now, Pakistan is a known textile exporter. It's a major textile exporter. So 1,600, imagine 1,600 clothing factories shutting down. What kind of consequences will they bring for the labor classes? Now, laborers have been laid off. Close to 1 million people, most of them youth, have left Pakistan or are in the process of leaving. A number of qualified doctors and engineers have left or are in the process of leaving. The inflation rate has hit a record of 38%. Ramadan has just started. So, I mean, it's quite a painful, especially for the lower rung of the society, it's quite a painful Ramadan. Food inflation is hurting the poor. It's even hurting the middle classes. They've had to, some of them have, had to bring down their budgets. And some people have stopped sending their children to school. So that's a serious tragedy. There has been an energy crisis with electricity prices going through the roof. And then you had the floods of 2022, which was a tragedy, which the floods cost Pakistan around 1,700 lives. and the economic cost was around, I think it touched $30 billion. And then you have an ever increasing the external debt problem, which is close to $140 billion. Then you have an image problem too, with religious militancy on the rise along the western region, mostly along the troubled border with Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. So there is penetration, there is threat from that side. So the country is in a precarious position right now, and I think it needs more than just committed leadership to address some of these concerns. You need a stroke of luck, which is not going to happen. That's not how states are, states develop or states are run. So as far as your question about India and China, I don't know much about China, but except the fact that they have parked billions of dollars in the form of various infrastructure investments as part of their Belt and Road Initiative. And I'm sure they are monitoring Pakistan's crisis very closely. But my concern, John, is India. India is a big worry for Pakistan. It has a India is an arch rival. We share common history. Both of these nations we came into existence in 1947 after the British left. But India now it had a secular image, and that's how it was very powerful democracy, secular democracy, and spoke of inclusive rights, spoke of minority rights. But now all of a sudden, over the last 5-10 years, I would say it has this fascist regime under Modi, and Modi suffers from is blinded by this dogmatic approach. And Modi's game plan for this region can result in a very disastrous future, not just for Pakistan, but also for India. And this needs to be stressed time and again on various platforms. India needs to change its bitter stance towards Pakistan. A weak Pakistan will not be in India's interest. The rise of radical India. You might have heard of the abrogation of Article 370 of the Indian Constitution, which basically gave protection to Kashmir's Muslim population. That has totally changed India's. That ruling has changed India's political landscape. As we talk, there's an ongoing curfew in Kashmir. Soldiers are often seen breaking into homes in the middle of the night, and they rooting through furniture, abusing men and women, damaging food supplies. So it's a very bad situation. And so here in Pakistan, there's a constant worry that Modi might provoke Pakistan into a sort of a military conflict. Anything like that can be fatal, not just for this region, but it can have severe consequences for I believe rest of the world, I would say.
Also, I would like to add, if I'm not wrong, Imran Khan was stressing this point a lot, especially
Yes.
mentioning the arsenal of the nuclear weapons that both of the country have, and that is, I mean, as you said, in a conflict, that kind of weapons can really affect, I mean, all Asia, but all the world, basically.
Of course, and then you have China, which does not have there's a regional conflict for hegemony between China and India, and China again is a nuclear power. You have Iran on one side, so it's quite a very hostile. This has become a very hostile region, and Modi is not helping. He's not a very he might be good for his own economy, but for the region, he's not. He's very myopic. He doesn't come with a lot of vision. He has no agenda for peace. He's only trying to provoke more bitterness and trying to bring more bitterness in a world which is already especially in a post-COVID world, which is already in a precarious situation.
Vijay, as an intellectual and as a writer, but also you're familiar with the journalist work. What do you think at the moment the future of the Pakistan will be, and how can Pakistan change its future for the better?
Well, I'm not Angelo. It's a tough question to answer, but I'm not a pessimist by temperament. If you'd ask this question to somebody else, so there are other people writing for newspapers and there are other people writing books who might comment on Pakistan. They might paint a very bad picture, but I'm not a pessimist by temperament. So I mean, if you do not expect good things to happen, they'd never happen. It's only a matter of putting in place structural reforms, controlling. It's a huge economy. It's still a 350, $400 billion economy in spite of all the problems, because we just need to enhance the size of the cake. I know we have to control it, wasteful consumption, transform the economy from a consumption economy that relies heavily on imports to a savings economy which is export oriented. Like I think Italy is an export oriented economy, Germany is an export oriented economy. So that is something that we need to focus on and basically produce goods for its own market, which it's quite a big market, 240 million people, and simultaneously cuffing up resources for education and research. And I think it has the potential to become $1 trillion economy in no time, provided there are structural reforms. But then there are serious, roadblocks. One also has to be, I can be an optimist, but you also have to be a realist. The situation on the ground is very bad. As I've said earlier, there's an external debt swelling to nearly $140 billion. And then domestic food inflation is 38.5%. It's a classic example of a governance disaster, and I can yarn on and on about it. Unless you have a devoted leadership, unless you have a military leadership that respects popular will, popular mandate, respects its own boundaries, stops supporting corrupt regimes, corrupt men who are in politics for their own, selfish motives, not much can change, I suppose. Pakistan will continue to be subjected to any sort of horrid eventuality.
Thank you very much, BJ. Thank you for for your time, and I mean, we actually learned a lot. And I was very fortunate to meet you and to actually talk to you a lot of times. So I know that your angle and your description is great. John, would you like to add anything? Any other questions?
Just to say, BJ, thank you very much.
Pleasure, John.
It's a pleasure having you on and hearing about your insights on Pakistan at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, both of you.